In this module, we are going to learn interfaces. So, what is exactly the interfaces? Interface is a syntactical contract between your classes and the interface or any particular object on which you are trying to implement this interface. It just tried to put some compulsions on what are the things should get declared, what are the things should get implemented so that your class or the implementing object will have a compulsory a set of fields ready with that. We are also going to see extending interfaces. We are also going to see how to implement multiple interfaces in a single class. We are also going to see the union examples with the properties of the interfaces. We'll also see how to apply the read-only properties on the interface and few of the examples of it. And all together, we'll learn how interfaces is beneficial to use in object-oriented programming. Let's try to understand interface with an example here. So we have earlier seen an example of a bank account, which was a parent class. Then we have created two child class, that is something called business bank account and the student bank account, and how the inheritance and everything will work with that. So in a similar fashion, we are also going to see the bank account interface. So this will be our bank account. And in this particular interface, we are going to define the set of compulsory fields declaration that should be present and also set of functionalities should be present. And this is called as declaration here. So we are saying that there is some interface called bank account in which there is a account number, account name, and account balance. And along with that, it also should have compulsorily two methods in that, that is debit and the credit. So here is a set of rules we are creating with the interface called bank account. Now, any particular class, if a bank want to create, let's say student bank account. So what a bank can do, they can just implement this bank account interface into that particular class. So at the time of creation of student bank account, these set of rules they compulsory need to follow inside the student bank account. Let's say so they are creating a student bank account class. So in this, they need to compulsorily define these three properties. What are those three properties? The account number, account name, and account balance, which was a compulsion put from the interface called bank account. Along with that, it also need to compulsorily define debit and credit functionality, which is declared here in the interface. So after completing this, a object of a student bank account can be created. On top of this, if bank want to add few more additional things they can add into the student bank account class. Let's see, for example, they want to add a college name as a property here, the fourth one. They also want to introduce a third functionality here, that is something called a student loan. They can do that. They are free to do that. But minimum, these things are compulsory. They need to implement here when they are implementing a bank account interface. So from now onwards, if bank creating any new type of bank account, let's say a business bank account, farmer bank account, or any bank account, they just need to perform this implementation. They need to compulsorily define these fields, and on top of that they can do any additional fields. So it will ensure if any new bank account that a bank is creating, like a student, farmer, or anything it could be, they are ensuring each and every class is compulsory having a debit and credit functionality, and it also having these compulsory fields in that. So this is how the interface will help to put a compulsion on the new all the classes that we are creating, that they are following a certain convention. Let's say one of the new rule that bank is putting up. So what they can do, they can just add that rule, they can add that property, they can add that function according to their new rule inside their interface. So as soon as they do that, compulsorily all these bank account, it could be student bank account, business bank account, farmer bank account, any classes which are implementing these bank account must immediately need to implement the new regulation. And this is how the interface will help to create a more robust application with applying all these rules as per the business requirement. Time to create an example here that we have discussed in the last lecture. So here I'm going to create a new interface the way we have created the class, similar way. It's an interface. The name of that will be bank account. Make sure the B is capital here. Okay, so this one I'm creating here, and I want to put these three properties inside that, the declaration. So it's an account number. Just a quick note, it might look a repeated example that we're trying here for the same bank account every places, but I'm intentionally using that because you can easily relate an example and try more focus on the new concepts that we are introducing here. So the first one is account number, which is of type number here, then account name, which is of type string, and account balance, which is of type number here. So this is what an interface we have created as we have discussed. It also has some other functionalities called debit and credit that we will do in the next lecture. So for now, we are ready with the interface. Let's try to create our class called student bank account. So student, I want to create a class called student bank account. Okay, so when I'm doing that, compulsorily what I need to do, I need to implement all these three properties which are defined over here. So let's do that. As soon as I'm doing here, I'm getting few errors. What could be the reason for that? I'll just take a pause for a minute. Let's think on it. Yes, we are missing the initialization here. So I can just quickly add here the constructor, or I can just give some dummy values here. So better, I'll just add a constructor here. It's an account number of type number here, then account name of type string, then account balance of type number. That's it. And let's quickly perform the initialization. Yeah, of course, the sequence doesn't matter here, just to follow the convention so that everything will be similar. And we are missing here with this keyword. Okay, that's it. Let's apply the prettier. Yeah, one important thing I would like to highlight here. So let me just comment this particular constructor again. So as soon as I'm implementing all the necessary three fields that is given by my interface here, it started giving me error. So whenever you are getting an error, please try to read out what exactly it's trying to say. Because here you are trying to implement a new concept. So you should immediately able to understand this error. We know already how to solve it. This is a known one, or this is with respect to the new implementation, whatever we are doing. This is very important to understand. So we have understood that, and accordingly we have added a constructor so that we will not be confused with whatever the new concepts we are learning. That's perfect. So this is my constructor. Let me just collapse this. Okay, so right now there is no connection between this class and this interface. Both are completely independent. So here, as a developer, to be more responsible, and I'm following all this regulation that is given here. But one of the developer might not follow these things at every or all these scenarios, and that's the reason we need to implement this interface here. Implements bank account. So what it is trying to say here, the student bank account class implements the bank account. This is what we have seen in the last slide. So if any one of the rule, if any one of the declaration that we are missing here to create a definition of that, it will give you the error. You are not performing the implementation in a correct way. Let's try to do it quickly. So I'm just giving a something variable here called number. So immediately it started complaining on student bank account. Let's say what it is saying. So it is saying that there is some variable called something is missing in the student bank account, but it is required by the bank account interface. So it is saying that this is compulsory, but you are not defining it over here for your functionality. So you're not following a rule to create a bank account class. So this is the reason it will be helpful. And if I'm not doing this implements bank accounts and everything, so it's a developer mistake. Developer might forgot it or everything. So let's remove this and keep it simple. That's it. We are done with this. And let's try to create a quick object for our student account. We need a set of parameters. Let's quickly give it. That's it. Yes. And we have created successfully our student class. So in the similar way, for example, we have created a student bank account. So the bank wants to create one more different type of bank account. That's a business bank account. So immediately they just need to follow these regulations inside that as well, and they can start implementing. So what they need to do. So I'll do one thing. I'll just take a pause for a minute, and you can just quickly try this implementation. Just create one more business bank account class and try to implement it and have a similar class to the student bank account which is present here. I'll just take a pause for a minute. Let's try to do it together. So this is a business bank account. That's it. We are done. Business account one, business bank account one. So this is I'm making it this. Few values I'm changing here, nothing else. That's it. We are ready. So we are ready of two different bank accounts, student bank account and the business bank account, which are following the regulations and everything given by the bank account interface here. So this is how we implement an interface into a class. In next lecture, we'll see adding functions compulsions of different functionalities by this particular interface so that the student bank account and the business bank account should compulsorily perform few functionalities. Let's try to add the function definition, the function declaration inside our interface. So here we are already having two function declaration, two method declarations, that is debit and the credit, which is a part of our bank account interface. So we have already created a bank account here and we have declared these three compulsory properties here. Let's try to declare these two methods. So there should be some function with the name debit for which the input should be compulsorily a number, and the output of this function should be void because we don't want to return anything out of this debit function. It will just perform whatever the debit operation is there. Again, we are not going to perform in much detail how the debit is going to happen here. We are just trying to understand how the compulsion of a debit function declaration can be imposed on the student bank account so that student bank account will be compulsorily creating and defining the debit functionality in its class. So when we are doing this, as soon as possible, as soon as we are doing that, the student bank account is started complaining. It started complaining that the property debit is missing in the student bank account class. But the bank account interface saying that it's a compulsory one. So we have to define the debit functionality here as per the regulations given by bank account interface. So let's try to do a debit. It's a function as is given in the declaration. There must be a one number input and it should return a void, and there should be some definition for that. And the for definition here, I'll just say something. Debit is happening in student class. That's it. Or or just student object. Perfect. So what is the new regulation was there for the debit? The student class implemented that, so it's all good. And now the student class object also we can create, and we can also call student one dot debit functionality, and we can see it's not allowing us. Okay, fine. We have to give some input. Yes, the debit is happening in the student object. The same way we have to also perform in the business account bank account here. So let me just copy the debit function from here and put it inside the business account. Perfect. Now from business account also, I can call the debit functionality. Okay, so with this, what we are trying to do, we are putting some compulsion on the student bank account. If you are saying that you are implementing me as a bank account, you are compulsorily need to define the debit functionality. The similar way we'll also do for the credit one. Credit, it's perfect. And here it's a credit. Again, it's a credit and it's happening in the business object over here. Perfect. So we have declared this debit and credit inside our interface, and we have implemented this debit and credit inside our student bank account. And one more additional bank, the class I have created, that is business, which is not present in this slide here. That's perfect. So here we have completed the function declaration inside a bank account interface and the definition of that inside our student class. Let's give a quick look how the TypeScript code is getting converted to the JavaScript when we are writing interfaces, student class, and we are implementing it and all these operations. Of course, it's not important to see what's happening in the JavaScript because that your TypeScript compiler will take care. But we are just looking into the JavaScript file that is converted from TypeScript after the compilation here, just to understand and improve our knowledge. What are the things supportable in the JavaScript and what are the things are not supportable in the JavaScript, and how the compilation is helping us in more detail. Very first thing, we are having an interface here, then we are having a student class and all this. So the meaning of this interface is just we are applying some extra restriction, some extra regulation on our class. That is the meaning of an interface. So if you open your JavaScript file, and if you see this particular file very clearly, it is having some options here, which is almost trying to represent a student bank account. Then it is also trying to represent a business bank account. That's it. There is no sign of the bank account that we have created. So where is this particular bank account in our JavaScript? Of course, we are able to see the student bank account. Then we are able to see something like a constructor. This is not an exact constructor, we can say. There are the debit and credit functionalities and few more things in some different fashion, but they are there. But we are completely missing with this particular interface called bank account. What could be the reason for that? Just think on it. I'll give you a minute to think on it, and then we'll see why it's missing here. Yes. So we'll try to discuss this now. So what is happening here? The meaning of type interface is just to put some extra validations or extra restriction when you're creating a new class. And as we have seen initially, this is something just for the developer validation so that developer won't miss any things. That's the reason. Let's say, for example, even though if I'm not implementing this, writing implements bank account, will everything will work? Yes, everything will work because our developer written all the properties very correct, written all the functionalities very correct, which are required by the student bank account. But if any developer can do some mistakes in something like this, right? Yes, they can do some mistake. Maybe they will forgot to write the debit functionality. So in that case, this particular student bank account class will not behave in a correct way. So that's the reason putting some regulations, putting some compulsions become compulsory. So we are writing here implements bank account. So when we are doing that, compulsorily all the things which are given here in the interface must need to be implemented over here just for the developer's sake of understanding and for the compilation purpose. There is no use of that apart from this. And that's the reason inside our JavaScript file, which is the output file here, you can see there is no sign of any interface. Again, we are doing the compilation against the ES5 version of the JavaScript. So if you just go to the TS file config, so be very careful on this file. I'm just changing it to ES6, the next generation JavaScript. and just saving it. As soon as I'm saving this, and if I go to my JavaScript file here, I can see I'm able to see the class or both the class, and again the interface is missing here. Because in the JavaScript latest E6 version, the next generation JavaScript, the classes are supportable, but there is no support for the interface. And of course, the interface is missing here. Just now we had a discussion on that, why it's missing in the JavaScript file. So carefully again get it back to the ES5 so that other things won't hamper. Let's see your JavaScript. Yes, it is something like previous one that we have seen, and come back on your TS file. So hope you understood how the compilation is happening and how your interface is looking inside your JavaScript. Using union types inside our interface property, let's see how it will help us and create our interface in a more good fashion that will be compatible for different types of bank accounts. So let's say the requirement here, this is the bank account regulations that is given by the bank, which says that these three properties are compulsory and these two functions are compulsory if any new type of bank account class you want to create. That sounds very perfect. So the account number is always in a type in a number. But some bank account types, like for example, for student, it's okay, it's a numeric. But for the business bank account, there is a requirement like it cannot be a number. It can be a string, or it should be a string for the business bank account accounts. So it is number and it is string for the business people. But here, when we are mentioning number, compulsorily the student bank account should consider it as a number and handle the things accordingly. And business bank account should also consider it as a number and handle accordingly. If the business bank account is directly changing this to string and started handling its operation accordingly, let's say they are also changing the constructor of account number to string, and also passing the argument here as a string, and let's say they are giving B1001. So this is how the business bank account want to operate its account number. But here it is immediately showing an error that this particular account number is should not be a string. It must be a number data type. So what we can do here, we can specify the account number can be of type number, or it can be of type string. So we can use the union type here to declare the account number with two different variations. So either you can use a number or a string. So in my student bank account, I'm using it as a number, and in my business bank account, I'm using it like a string. So there is no problem and there are zero errors in your application now. So with this, what we are achieving, we are making this particular interface in a more accessible way so that different types of bank accounts can use different types of account numbers of string and number. What's the difference between an interface and a class, and when to use an interface and when to use a class? So first let's distinguish both of these, and then later we can decide when to use an interface and when to use a class. So here in interface, we have figured it out. This is just a declaration. You're just giving a set of rule book that need to be followed by the implementing class. That's it. There is no definition present. There is no functionality present inside our interface. It's just a rule book, we can say, that we are mentioning. But if you just go to the class here, the class can have both. If you just compare this particular bank account class with this particular bank interface. So this bank account class here contains some functionality called debit. It consists of some definition. Again, it is having the show balance definition, how the show balance is working, how the credit is working, how the debit is working. It is also having few of the properties. They are also performing the initialization for that. Means actual operations are happening here. Along with that, it can also give you some set of rule books that need to be implemented in its child class. We have seen something called here the abstract net banking. So this is one of the rule that this class want to put on its implementing class. So the class consists of both the declaration as well as definition, the rules that need to be given to the child class for the implementation, or it can also have some of the implementation in its as well previously. But in interface, everything, just rules will be there. No working will be given. So if you just want to create a rule book that need to be applied on a particular class, so you should be going with an interface, or when there is a requirement, you have already some functionality that you can write already and some of the rules in that. And then you want to create the inheritance and everything, then you can go with the classes. Otherwise, if you have just a simple working, suppose something like this, a class called student bank account, you want to hold account number, name, balance and everything, and you want to define few of the functionalities, you can go ahead and create a class, because you know how to create a debit functionality, how to create a credit functionality, how to initialize these variables, properties, and make use of it, and later you can create the objects. So here the class will be suitable. So hope it's pretty clear when to use an interface and when to use a class. Let's see extending an interface into another interface. So this is similar to the class inheritance that we have already seen. And let's understand this with a scenario. So we are having a set of rule book here that is called interface bank account, that is being implemented by our student bank account and the business bank account. So let's say the bank is creating a new rule book, the version 2 of the rule book. So every rule which is mentioned here, that is exactly similar. On top of that, the bank created some new rules. So bank is saying, I'm going to create a new rule book called bank account. That's perfect. And here I want to give the new rule here, that is something like what we can say, the compulsory, it should have not a helpline, we can say. Let's give a name called V2. What the next functionality we can give it? We have the debit, we have the credit. Let's say we'll say net banking. There must be a net banking functionality to the customers. This is what the bank is saying in the new V2 rulebook. But this particular V2 rulebook should also consist of all these rules. What we should do then, copy and paste all of this here. So instead of doing this, why can't directly we inherit this interface into another interface here using extend? That's it. So inside the new rulebook interface, bank account version 2, we are having a set of rules that it should compulsory have these three properties, and it should compulsory have these two, and this is the third one, these three functions as a declaration. So let's go to this particular student bank account, and the student bank account is following the first rule book interface, that is the bank account. And let's say student bank account started following the second rule book called V2. As soon as we do that, immediately the student bank account class started complaining. What it is complaining, it is saying that inside a new rule book called bank account V2, there is a method called net banking that you are missing to implement. So you must give a net banking facility to the student class here. So let's do that quickly. Net banking. So there are no parameter, and we are just saying your student net banking. That's it. Okay, as soon as we are doing that, it's super happy. Now you see the business bank account is not giving you any errors. Why? I'll just take a pause for a minute so that you can think on it. Yes, our business bank account is not giving any error because it's still following our first rule book, that is interface bank account. As soon as you say that our business accounts also started following the new regulations called V2, then it will also complain you. But I'll keep it V1 for the sake of understanding for now. Implementing multiple interface. So what's the need of implementing multiple interface? What I mean with that? Let's say we are already having an interface called bank account. We are implementing that inside business bank account, and this is what we have done. This is our interface, and this is our business bank account where we are implementing the bank account. But now the topic is there is a need to implement multiple interfaces inside our business bank account. So what could be that? cause. So with this particular interface implementation here, we are saying that we are following the business bank account class is following all the regulation that is needed for the bank account. So let's say the government introduced few more new regulations for the banking standards. So that also need to be implemented here, right? So that time we also need to say comma and the new interfaces. So as per the new government regulations, we also need to implement that here, and the necessary changes inside the class we need to do. So that's the reason we need the multiple interface. So let's say there is a new interface with the name called bank standards, which is a new regulations given by government. And it is saying that you must have a compulsory one property called ID proof for the customer for any business bank account. And you must also provide one new functionality to them that is helpline. So in this way, we are implementing two interface. One is the previous one, bank account, and the new one, bank standards inside our business bank account. So when you are implementing the new interface, bank standards, into the business bank account class, so you need to implement all the functionalities given inside the new standards. So you need to add ID proof as a property, you need to add helpline as a function as per the new guidelines given in the business standards interface. So let's try to do this with a quick example. So I'll create a new interface here called business. So what's the name we have given? Bank standards. Okay, bank standards, and here we should have an ID proof. One field here, I'll just mention as a string for now. And we should also have some mechanism for the helpline. So it is just won't accept any particular parameter, and it is just a void. It's want to give a dummy functionality declaration here. So the new bank standards are saying that you must have a ID proof and the helpline, and it must need to be applied on a business bank account class. So when we want to do that, so you just need to apply one comma here, and you need to say my business bank account class also started supporting the new regulations given inside the bank standards interface. As soon as you are doing that, the class is started complaining. You are missing with the two things. One is the ID proof, and one more is it is just showing you the ID proof for now. So let's say ID proof here. Okay, and I'm just initializing with this something called NA here, just the sake of that initialization error won't come. But the important here is that we are completing the declaration part and implementation part for ID proof. If you just go here again, it is also showing you it must also have one helpline functionality. Let me just make here like business helpline, and the errors are gone. In this way, we have implemented two interface inside a single class, and our new class is following to two regulations. One is bank account and new is the bank standards. Here, one quick interesting the compiler related functionality I would like to tell you that just now I observed here. Let me just go to the business bank account here and comment out the helpline, and as well as also comment me the ID proof. So how many issues we are having here right now? We are having two issues. We need to implement ID proof as a property, and we need to implement helpline as a function inside this business bank account. We are having two errors. If you just hover your cursor here on this particular class, what are the issues for this class? So it is just telling you there is only one problem, that is ID proof. It is not telling you there is some problem, something called you also need to implement helpline. So why? I'll just give you a minute to think on it, how the compiler behavior is working here. Yes. So the compiler, if we are having a set of errors in our file, it will just detect the first error and it will just ignore all the remaining error. It will just stop the execution and compilation itself. As soon as the TypeScript compiler figured out any particular issue, it will just stop the compilation process and alert you there is some problem with this. So let's go here and add perform the implementation for ID proof. And now it will tell you the second problem. The second problem is helpline. Now go here. So in this way, we have also understood how the compilation is working when there are different errors. It is just showing us the first because the rest of the errors that compiler also don't know, because the compilation won't happen complete after that error. Let's see a quick example how the interface can be used simply instead of the big object-oriented complexity and everything. Because of course it's a TypeScript which is getting converted to the JavaScript. It is giving you the facility for the object-oriented programming, but it doesn't like always you should be using always the object oriented programming for all the simple requirement, because that will again convert you something like a JavaScript, Java and the C sharp where everything is object oriented. So it's a TypeScript where Java, the object oriented principles are supportable, but it's not always compulsory to use the object oriented principles. Let's see with a quick example here. I'm creating an interface like an employee. So I want to create this employee interface with, there should be a name for the employee compulsorily. There should be the city for the employee compulsorily. Then it should have some skills, this employee compulsory, and which is of type string of array. So this is a simple interface I have created. So I don't need to create a class and then extend it or whatever I should be. So it's an interface. It's a set of rule book. When you are saying it's an interface, it's a set of rule book that if there is an employee, he must have a name, city, and the skills. So you can directly create an object, which is a great thing provided in the JavaScript. So let's say let employee one, and it directly started creating an object. And before creating an object, it is specifying that I'm going to implement employee interface, or I want to follow the type which is given inside the interface employee. So here it becomes compulsory to define to give the name, city, and the skills inside this object, because you are adding interface as a type here for this employee one object. And let's quickly try adding a name. Good. Then city. Okay. And the skills here. Angular, then Node.js. That's perfect. So we have created an object and we haven't created any particular big object oriented things here like classes and everything in Aliases. We have just simply created a rule book with interface and we directly created an object. So now this object is saying that I'm following the data type called employee as an interface here. So compulsorily you can find the name, city, and the skills in me. So all the employees now will be created who follows this type will compulsorily have these parameters. So this is how we can simply use the interface with direct object without any classes and everything. And this is what is used in many libraries when you need to call the REST APIs and everything. What is utility types? So utility types will help you to perform some common type manipulation which may be required temporarily for some specific purpose. Let's try this with a quick example here. So we are having an employee interface here, which is saying that compulsorily you should having the name, city, and the skills. That's perfect. It means whenever I want to create an employee object, I need to compulsorily give all these options. But let's say there is a requirement, it not logically makes sense here, but these things are available. You might relate with any other example. I'm creating one more here called employee 2. When I'm saying employee 2 here, so it's again compulsory to define all these three options, right? But let's say I don't have the city, I don't have the skills and everything. I just have the name here and I'm giving the name like this. Okay, but immediately it started complaining me. You're just providing the name, but it also require other options like city and skills. So what I can do, I can just immediately manipulate this type that I'm using. So what I can say here, I can say partial. What exactly I'm trying to say here. Previously, I said I'm going to use employee as a data type in which compulsorily these three things will be available. Now I'm saying I'm going to use the employee as my data type, but partially. So this partial is a utility type. So what is happening here? This partial, due to this partial, it is having uh, three particular what we can say the properties here, right? So out of that, any one we can use here. It is not compulsory to have everything. But what's the restriction here? If I'm using something new here, let's say for example, company. If I'm trying to use any new here called ABC, it will start complaining me. It will not allow. Because what's the meaning of partial? If there are three available, out of that, everything is optional. You can use at least one, two, whatever your choice. But you cannot introduce anything new because you're saying partial of employee. So I can't anything use anything new. I can also just go with city also like this, and I can also go with one. If I just go with zero, will it be possible? I'll just take a pause here. Let's think on it or just give it a try. Yeah, let's try together. Yeah, it's of course possible with because with partial utility type, it is saying that all these three things are optional for you. It's your choice, either you want to implement or not. That's it. So let me just leave this with just name so that it will help you when I will download the code from the resources. Let me create the third one called employee 3, and this employee 3 is before creating employee 3 here, let me just change our data type. So these skills I made optional here now. So these skills I made optional inside my employee data type. That's perfect. So let's create a quick copy out of it here. Employee 3 and the set of skills. Okay, so this is a normal data type that employee need is following all the three things are given. But here the skills are optional. So let me just collab it. The skills are completely optional here. So I can also remove this. Very correct. It will also run with 2. But if you want, everything should be implemented. Every property which is given in this particular interface, either it is optional like this or the compulsory, everything should be implemented over here. If you want to do that, what you can do, you can remove this, but that will also create problem with the main data type, right? You just want to do it temporarily, so you can do the temporary data type manipulation over here with the utility type called required. Okay, as soon as you do this, it should start giving you error. What's the error? So it's saying that you must implement skills because you are not only implementing the employee data type, and all the properties in that are required compulsory for you due to this utility type. So when you just uncomment this, it will just start working as normal. And if you just go to the here, the which is just following the employee, and if you even do remove the skills, it will work for you because it's an optional one. But due to this particular utility type of required, it become every property compulsory of this employee interface for you. So this is how the utility types, few more utility types we'll see in the next lecture. Let's start with a few more utility types, how it works. Let me just remove this optional parameter here so that the upcoming example will be more simple for us and comment out these. Okay, so I want to create one more object here, which is of type employee. And this time my requirement is I just want to omit a specific properties over here that I don't want to implement over here. I just want to omit some specific things. So I can use omit utility type, omit. I want to omit some specific things from the employee, and which are the properties I want to omit out of it, I can just mention here. So I want to omit the skills. So skills are not required. I want to remove the skills from employee the interface as a property for this particular employee one object. So I just need to give name and city over here. That's perfect. And I'm able to successfully create a employee one object here. Okay, if I try to give the skills here, So I'm trying to give the skills here. It is immediately started complaining skills is not allowed because you have omitted it from your employee data type. Okay. Along with this, there is one more something called as, let me just guess the name out of it. Yeah, pick. So if I want to specifically pick a few of the properties only, so I can just say pick, and let's say I just want compulsorily the name out of this particular employee interface. So in employee interface, I'm having the three compulsory field that need to be implemented, but I'm saying I just want to pick only one out of it, that is name. And with that, I'm able to successfully create my object. And if I add anything other than that, it start giving me error. And if I want to include pick up multiple things, I can just add an union operator here. So city, I also want to give as a city. And as soon as I'm doing that, it started complaining. To complete this object initialization with this data type, whatever you have selected, you have given the name, you also need to give the city here. So this is how the different utility types we can work. There are many utility types given by the TypeScript that will help you to manipulate the data type for some certain purpose and temporarily. Interfaces versus typologies. So what's the difference between these two? These two are almost similar, but there are differences with respect to the object-oriented programming and everything. The typologies more like tends to the JavaScript related things, and the interfaces from the object-oriented principles and everything. So of course, it's better to use the interfaces always, but also there are the typologies which are supportable and which almost work like an interfaces, and many libraries also use that, which are purely written previously in the JavaScript and later converted to the newer version of the JavaScript. So let's try to understand, and here I'll request you not to perform any implementation for this particular lecture. This is just to understand a differentiation, because the no coding exercise is necessary, oral I just want to say here. So let me just create a quick interface here with employee. So I'll just quickly create few things here. So I'm saying it's an employee interface and there is a compulsory name is should be there. Let employee one, give me a second. Employee one, yeah, that's it. And I'm giving the name. Okay. Okay. Here's a perfect way that we have seen already. We can also do this in this way. The type employee should be equals to Uh, one thing I'm missing here. Yeah. So this is the same name we are giving, right? So let's give version 2. Okay. So I'm creating one more type called employee version 2. And this is exactly similar to your interface. Or let's say just comment the interface here and give the similar name. So not even this particular usage of the employee interface we are doing that is changing here. It's almost the same. The even object is of type employee. It doesn't matter. It's a type alias or it's an interface here. What exactly matter? What are the important or compulsory things out of it we need to implement here? That's it. So here is like we can use alternatively whenever the type alias is needed or the interface is needed. One more good usage of the type alias where we can't use the interface. Let's say I'm creating a type here called employee ID equals to number. So let emp ID. So generally we give a number employee ID and say 101. So this is an employee ID which is of type number. So instead of this number, I can use the type alias called employee ID. This we have also seen in the starting lectures. But here I can't use the interface because interface is something like that when there is an object and everything, that time it will be useful. So type alias will also help you to work with the primitive types. Okay, next we can also work on the extend kind of thing and everything. So this is an employee, uh, let's say employee, a second version of the employee we are creating here, in which the city is also a compulsory parameter and this is doing an extend. Sorry, let me just convert this to an interface, and here I want to extend employee one, and here city is compulsory. That's perfect. Now if I want to create employee object of this particular new version of the employee 2, so two things I need to give. One is the name and second is the city. Okay, after this, if I want to convert the same thing inside the type alias, how it will work. So we need to give here. So let me just comment out these things and let's see the equivalent code out of it. So copy. This is a type. Let's uncomment it. It will be an equal to symbol here. Okay, we are ready with the first one. Let's do for the v2, and inside the v2 there is something called as city. So these are exactly similar to the above. Now we just need to perform these extend. So how this extend will work? So what we need to do, I'll just give you a minute on this. You can just google it out and let's see how you can do it, then we'll do it together. Okay, so we just need to mention here employee and symbol. That's it. So the previous employee, all the data or all the properties and everything we have mentioned that, and the new one. So the employee 2 is now started supporting two things. One is name and the city. So let's quickly copy this code and put it here. That's it. It will work. It means the extend inheritance will also work here very correctly. Okay, so we can also use the yeah, interface and the type with the class also. Let's try to do with a quick example. So we have something called interface here already. Let's copy it. Okay, and let's say class. What will we give like employee? Let's say just v2 for the sake of understanding for now. Implements the employee interface. So we must compulsory declare it. We should write a constructor. And I'll not write a constructor here because we know that this is just an initialization problem here. It's an NA here. That's it. Okay. So now we are performing an implement of interface. So I'll just give you a minute to think on it, how you can do the same thing for the type alias. Okay. So to do the same thing with the type alias, let's comment out this thing. Convert this into the type. Sorry, it's type. Okay. And then let's go to this class definition. And here we go. We do not even need to change anything that we are doing the implements here. So here in implement, it doesn't matter you are giving an interface or you are giving a type alias. That's a new thing that we have learned now. So we'll just see few more options with this type alias and everything in the next lecture. You can also just explore these options, but not necessary to implement any code for it. Let's observe a strange behavior of the interface here with an example. And this might be a strange from an object-oriented principles or maybe novel scripting. But with this, we can understand how the JavaScript is also understanding the code and how it behaves when start combining the things and everything. So let's try to create a simple interface here. I'll just create with one property in that. So let's say just name I'm creating here, and uh, that's it. And what I will do, I'll just copy the same thing, the same interface name here. And here I'm just mentioning the city. what should happen ideally? Ideally, it should give us error like other scripting, other programming, like it's a duplicate identifier. There is already some interface called employee, and you're creating one more. But what TypeScript will do? TypeScript will combine these together and it will do in this way. So this is what happening in background for the TypeScript. So JavaScript, like it try to make it more and more lightweight when we say, so these are all the options that happens in background when the execution happen and everything, which makes the JavaScript lightweight. So it's our responsibility to keep it as much as code good. And anyway, TypeScript will keep it, but it's our also responsibility to keep our code good. And let's also create a quick object here of employee here and try to give a name here. So yes, perfect. And it's also starting complaining that it also missing with the city. So let's also add the city here. Okay, so that's perfect. Why it's complaining? Any guesses? What could be the reason? Okay, I'm missing the comma here. So that's it. We are done with this, and let's try to like convert the same thing inside the type, and let's see what happens. Uh, this is just a uh, quick try I want to give here. Like it's a type, and we should say equals to, and again it's a type. We should say equals to, but it started complaining immediately here. Like employee is already defined and everything. Let's make it one. It's good. No, because it's something like a variables and everything when we are creating a type here. So it should be most a unique identifier. So using type aliases, it's not possible, but with interfaces, it's possible.